kid's dream of getting to actually go and work at the World Cup and cover it. So, first of all, gentlemen, right, and you're very welcome along, state your credentials, okay, in terms of covering World Cup. And I use veterans in the glorious sense of time-honoured, with medals on your...
You can just look at us, we're all of a certain vintage, Tommy, you know? We're not playing for the minor team.
Most honourable sense of the word veterans.
You can use it disparaging if you want. Sorry.
I did 4, 94, 98, 2002, 2006, 2 with Ireland, 2 without. The 2 without are different. You have different responsibilities. The 2 with are fantastic. My intro in the Sunday World last week was, it's not the same when you're not there.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's not the same when you're not there. I think for the vast majority of the people who... The Irish soccer team are probably the single unifying force when they get to a major finals, World Cup, or as we have done for the last 2 Euros, that brings the whole country together. Everybody, no matter what sport is their favourite sport, everybody knows the concept of a Euros. Sometimes FIFA managed to complicate the World Cup, but most people know the concept of what it's about and what you're trying to do and can follow it. And the whole country goes on fate. I was here during Italia 90. I know what that was like. The famous photograph of O'Connell Street with literally nobody on it during the match against Romania. That's a great memory, actually, seeing that photograph the following day in one of the papers. And then the 2 that we weren't there, you see an awful lot of good football.
Yeah.
You usually try and follow the teams that aren't there playing in the next tournament, the next qualifying round, which wouldn't be open to us if we were going this year. They haven't made the draw. But you see, you're looking for different things. You're looking to see if we draw Germany, well, we know what Germany are. If we draw, say, Sweden or something like that, what Sweden are like and whatever. And then you're looking at other matches. Like, I mean, I did the famous match in, what year was it, 98, between US and Iran, which was different.
Yes, of course.
They were sworn enemies
different story
at the time.
Altogether, yeah.
Different story. FIFA deliberately gave it to a Swiss referee because he was the only country in the world with which both countries had diplomatic relations. They all had embassies in one country or another, but the only country in which they had both embassies were Switzerland, the famous.
And was that a tense occasion, you know, in terms
it was,
of covering it off the field?
Yeah, it was. It was a huge occasion. You have to go back. It's 20 years ago. Things were a little bit, you know, the Iran-Iraq war had just been on. What was the official name for America in Iran at the time? Oh yeah, the Great Satan.
The Great Satan.
That was the official name. Official name of America in the country at that time was the Great Satan. So here they were playing a football match. I think St Etienne, was it?
Yeah.
I think it was St Etienne. I'm not sure, but that was a special occasion. That wasn't much to do with football now, but it was a memorable football match. I think the Iranians won.
It's when World Cups kind of transcend the game in a sense. So with and without for you, John, yourself as well, Paul.
Yeah, I went to Italia 90 as a fan, and then covered 94 with Ireland, 98 without us, 02 of course, and Saipan with Ireland, and 06 in Germany, and 2010 in South Africa. Didn't do the full things in South Africa, but those were the ones I did. And as John says, they're incredible occasions. I feel in modern era with TV and live media and social media that some events only really get going when they start, or a few days. And I think this World Cup's actually been a bit of a slow burner, but now in the last few days, it's in many ways the only show in town. And when the first game starts, even though it's only Russia and Saudi Arabia, but Thursday night people will be really engrossed in it. On Friday we have a fantastic game between Portugal and Spain, which could easily be a semi-final or a final in its own right. So, as John says, and Philip will also say, when we're not there, it takes some of the edge off it, but it's still an incredible event. And, you know, I grew up, the first time I remember was 1970. You know, I had my Esso coins. Yeah. That was the big marketing ploy. Everybody was collecting Esso coins.
I have the full set at home.
Well, yeah, I don't have a few. Yeah.
I'll swap Tommy right
I Pele if you have a spare one.
Yeah.
You know, then there was 74 with Cruyff. Remember that? You know, you had I remember having my Daily Mail wall chart for the 1970 World Cup. You know, my father, my uncle, or someone had given it to me, and it was live football. That's, you know, people forget there was so little live sport. And there was live football on. So there was games on 2 and 3 times.
People say that 70, the thing that stands out, a lot of people's memories, obviously the great Brazil team, but the colour TV was
just coming
in its infancy.
Well, we had black and white, has to be said. Right. But it didn't take too much from it. Although when England played all white in most of that World Cup. When they were playing the Czechs or the Romanians, you could hardly tell one team from the other. I can remember that, black and white.
Philip, for yourself, I mean, again, I think with and without Ireland as well, and also those sort of childhood memories, are they there? Are there things that stand out, things that kindled the passion for the game?
Oh yeah, I was there in 90 and 94 and 98 and 02, and I covered 3 of them involving Ireland. The Italia 90, probably the highlight in many ways, was actually getting to play with Liam Brady, who should have been playing in that World Cup finals, and he played in the press match. And I remember I think I actually passed the ball to him at one stage. I just given the ball to Liam Brady. The little story with that, actually, that might come later on, Tommy. But that would have been, so 3 covering Ireland, 1 covering without Ireland. And the 98, when I spent a lot of time with Paul, we travelled around France. And I think we worked there, we got to every venue bar Nantes. I think Nantes was the one venue we didn't get to.
I was there, so we got to every venue.
We got to see something like, I think it was 13 or 14 matches. Yeah. And we were meeting English journalists. We were covering England, but also covering games around them. English journalists were coming out of camp. They were up in Brittany in La Boule or something like that, and they were saying, "What's going on in the World Cup?" Yeah. You know, they were in camp, and we were going from St Etienne to Lyon to up the north to our friend Lens and Paris as well. Montpellier and Toulouse. We got to see a match there where we saw our friend Eddie. What was he? Bordeaux.
Eddie Foley was
the linesman in Bordeaux.
Nearly melted.
Nearly melted. It was the heat that day, Tommy, was unreal. It was so bad in the press box. We had to leave to go back into the shaded area watching the game. And Eddie Foley was the one Irish representative in that World Cup. He was the linesman. And he's only a small fella, but at the end of the game there was a pool of water where Eddie had been. He was shattered.
He survived.
Sweated for Ireland.
Fair play to him. But in terms of a childhood memory, yeah, 1970. And it's funny, we were away last week. We were in Paris, and we were, as we always do, we're sitting down having a beer, and I just threw out a question to Paul. I said, the 1970 World Cup, the 16 teams. I said, have a go at them there. Fair play to him. He got them in like 3 or 4 minutes, and I'm going, feck. I thought I might have called out 1 or 2 of them, but 97. The SO coins got a mention, and the stickers as well. 97 for me. I remember watching the World Cup final, and it was in colour. Watched it in Rosslare Golf Club of all places.
Very fancy.
Very fancy. They colour down there, yeah. But I always remember the bank save. The bank save from Pelé was the one where the ball was he just pushed it up under the bar, and Pelé dummying the defender. Or was it the goalkeeper?
Uruguay.
The dummy, but he saw the dummy and then hit it wide.
But he missed, He missed.
And he missed, yeah. So I was saying with the same lads, like we're all similar vintage. 1970 World Cup was special. From a journalist point of view, I probably got a bigger buzz out of 98 because I had more scope to go and watch matches.
It's interesting, isn't it? You had that sense that you were actually
at a World Cup,
at a World Cup, and not just covering.
Otherwise, you're at the World Cup with Ireland. Huge difference.
Huge difference. One month going back in 2002, after I stayed on and covered the rest of it after we knocked out, and I covered England playing Brazil. And that was the day that David Seaman made the howler from the Ronaldinho free kick. And afterwards, he cried in the mixed zone area. That's one of the other memories that I have. Is he broke down talking to the media afterwards? That's an image that
David Seaman, of course, like a vastly experienced senior
he was
player.
He was man of the match in so many other games for England, but that day he did have a howler.
Yeah.
But I suppose that thing, it's once every 4 years. I know there's a finals every 2 years, but that's the Euros. There's no Brazil, there's no Argentina, there's no exotic Senegals or Australias or South Koreas in the Euros. It's once every 4 years. We'll probably get along to talking about it later. Like, will it define the careers of Messi or Ronaldo if they don't win the World Cup? This is Messi's 4th go. The manager miraculously managed to leave him off in 2006 when Argentina needed a goal. Was it against Germany?
Yeah.
And he had Messi on the bench and used all his subs. But this is his 4th World Cup. I think it's the same for Ronaldo, isn't it? He was there in 2006. He was the famous wink he gave when he got Rooney sent off. So this is his 4th.
I don't necessarily think that their careers are going to be defined by World Cups.
No, they probably won't be, because what you were talking about a second ago, we now see so many matches. 30, 40 years ago, Pelé and Maradona's careers, that's what we remember them for, because we never saw him winning the league with Napoli. He's a god, as we know. You were in Naples.
It certainly gets used as a stick to beat Messi with in terms of greatest of all time debates. And the man, I think it's yourself, Paul, who's picked this out. John just mentioned him there, Maradona, who is one of those players. And when you talk about defining people's careers, you have Pelé with his 3 World Cups. You have Cruyff, Turn. You have scores of players, Jeff Hurst, and players who are just Bobby Moore, just defined by World Cups. Maradona in 1986. Now, personally, this is my sort of origin sort of experience with
football. So you're younger than us, Tommy.
Yeah, slightly, just slightly. Don't remember the SO coins.
Tommy as well.
I know there were no SO coins in 1986, as far as I know. But it was just for anybody of that age, and I guess for you guys as well, Paul. You've picked it out as your memory. I think, do we have a clip of that one there ready to go, Shane? No, we don't have that one, but everybody remembers it. In terms of what John has touched on, a defining performance by a great player in a World Cup.
And against England, consider what he'd done a few minutes earlier when he punched the ball in. And from the replays, he couldn't have told definitively that look. But I think we all accepted Shilton was apoplectic with anger over what had happened. And then, I mean, you know, it was only 4 years after the Falklands War, so there was so much antagonism between the two nations. Then the greatest player in the world goes in and punches the ball. He was like a corner forward coming into the square.
It's funny you mentioned GA, because a famous Irishman said to me, it's easy knowing Peter Shilton never played Gaelic. Because Maradona was 5'7" and Peter Shilton was a big man with the advantage of being able to use his hands.
Let's hear that famous moment.
Maradona just walked away from Houghton then. Maradona, Houghton, Maradona! They're appealing for offside. The ball came back off the foot of Steve Houghton, and Maradona gives Argentina the lead. The England players protesting to the referee. But the little man who started it by walking past Glenn Hoddle, that's where the ball came from Hodge. Maradona had continued the run forward. And the goal is given. At what point was he offside? Or was it a use of the hand that England are complaining about?
The use of the hand, wasn't it? But then the moment, obviously, shortly afterwards, you know, the goal.
That's I think that, and it stands out. And let's remember that he did it against Belgium.
The same goal.
Almost that he slalomed his way. It was incredible. And in those days, the tackles were sort of tastier than they are now. And then I was in Italia '90. I went to the day before we played Romania. I went over to watch Brazil and Argentina in their second round game.
I was at that game with you.
Yeah. And Brazil with a better side that they couldn't score, and Argentina, and late in the match he repeated it again, and he teed up Caniggia for the winner. And it was one of those memories outside an Irish sort of realm that just stands out there for me. Lucky enough to actually be there to watch that game.
The other match that was on that weekend that we all forget about, that was a great game, and the other one that we remember for terrible reasons was West Germany Holland, when the two lads spat at each other. Rudy Voller with the Perm and Frank Rijkaard. Yeah, I think it was the same day. Of course, Holland were only in that game because they lost the toss to us. We had to toss for that. The two teams were tied going through, but we had to toss for it. We got Romania and they got Germany. And then Rudy Voller and Frank Rijkaard decided to swap Perms.
On such
small things.
Small moments.
But just Italia '90 again. One of the memories I was sitting in the stands, or to say standing in the stand for the famous shootout, and O'Leary scored and Bonner saved, is that how it had grasped the imagination of people. An Irish family sitting in front of me who was obviously their first ever football match. And they were well-to-do, and at the end of the game, the little 4, 8-year-old turned to, "What happens now, Dad?" And the dad said, "You know what happens now? There's a penalty shootout." "Oh, what's that, Dad?" "We take penalties down into that goal there, and the Romanians go up to that end and kick penalties." That shows you this man had never been at a football match in his life.
I want to get to that. We might come back then to sort of non-Irish memories. I know, John, you have the Bergkamp goal in '98 as one of your memories, but just in the Irish sense, and especially that sort of Italia '90, that sort of those heady moments. And, you know, remarked earlier that it was a kind of transformative time for both soccer in Ireland and indeed, you know, sport and culture and everything. And it stands the test of time. Now, at the time, you'd obviously had Euro '88, which we'd had a lot of the anniversary stuff this week talking about that. Was there still a sense of absolute novelty of a country, like not a soccer country or not a football country, getting to grips with this, you know, just in the terms of the day-to-day of covering the event and in the build-up to Italia '90, what became known as this great cultural event, Italia '90 at the time? What are your memories?
It was huge beforehand. I was sort of sent on sort of advanced duty with the Irish football team. We played a match in Turkey in boiling heat, and then we went to Malta for a week. Then we came back. Italy, yeah. That was the famous time where Niall Quinn produced an atlas to the travel arranger, the late travel organiser, Miss Chisholm.
Gave her an atlas.
And said the atlas, and the shortest distance between a straight line, you know, we're Malta, right, there's Dublin. Why are we going to Italy and then going this way? And the lads were slagging her, and she didn't regard it as being funny at all, because the travel arrangers were a little bit chaotic, and Jack just kind of went along with it. But we had the camp, and then we came back, and then we went off again, and there was something special building up about that. And talking to players, and the players are very good. I mean, Mick McCarthy was very good. I remember he was the Irish captain, and he was making the point beforehand. He said, "Look, Euro '88 was new. That was novel, and we weren't quite sure how we were going to do, and we kind of better than we thought we were going to do. But had we been beaten in all 3 games, well, it was our first time. But we had done quite well, and we should have got to the semi-finals. So the players knew that they could perform at the highest level, and they said, right, we're going to the World Cup. This now isn't something that we're afraid of, or we're not sure what we're going to do. We know we can do it, and we're going to make our mark, and we're going to see how far we can go." There was certainly a sense among the players, and McCarthy will still tell you that his worst moment was when we lost to Italy. He went to the dressing room and he couldn't go out and see the fans afterwards. He felt that was an opportunity lost. That team, that was a weak World Cup, and that team could have got to the semi-finals. Maybe even got to the final, but certainly the semi-finals. Though there was beforehand, it was gone a little bit mad, and the demands on journalists got big as well. I mean, the evening papers, we had 2 people there for the Evening Herald, myself and PJ Cunningham. I think Jimmy Meaghan might have been on his own for the Evening Press. But every newspaper was sending extra people out, and you knew going over there it was something a little bit special. And that's why my first memory that I picked was of a goal, the first Irish goal in the 1990 World Cup finals. And I don't know whether the clip is there, but the reason I picked it was because we were playing England in our opening match. We had played them 2 years ago in the opening game, and we had stunned them, and they were smarting still for that 2 years later. They still had most of their players, still had the same manager. We had the same manager. We had most of our players. But this was the World Cup. If we had got off to a bad start, and if you lose your first game, and you know from the stats, it's hard to get out of your group. And then we were 12, 13 minutes away from losing that game when Kevin Sheedy scored a goal that just shifted the whole momentum in the game, and also gave the Irish fans a reason to believe that we're going to march on. And the final point was we were out in the islands. They'd kept us away from the mainland, and I think that was deliberate. For England were in the mainland. They wanted to keep England fans away from the mainland.
Weren't supposed to be with them.
And in Izmir it had been boiling hot, Tommy. In Malta it was boiling hot. We got to Sardinia, Cagliari. It was boiling hot. And on that night of that game, the heavens opened with thunder and lightning, and it was like something out of The Tempest. And later on in the game, Kevin Sheedy, whom Jack never quite trusted, scored a precious goal, and he nicked the ball away from Steve McMahon, who he would have known from his Everton times, and he would have had Derby Jules with him against Liverpool. And that goal to me was vital, because it was our first goal in the World Cup, one that should never be forgotten, and it was vitally important.
Yeah, the air could have got out of the balloon very quickly. It's also sort of a real turning point for English soccer history. Like looking back at it now, I know there's been programmes on the History Channel this week when Lineker and Terry Butcher and Paul Parker are going back to Turin and their semi-final memories and all that they see it as that's when things turn from the hooligan-ridden sort of downtrodden sport of the 70s and 80s to what became the 90s Premier League boom, and it almost changed the face. At the time, though, of course, in terms of Ireland, England, the concern, if I remember rightly, was the hooliganism problem, wasn't it? How was that? And how did it actually transpire at the time?
Given that Michel Platini has since admitted that they rigged the 1998 World Cup draw to see France and Brazil apart, I think Philip is very correct that they rigged it to put England out on the islands for obvious reasons. I don't think they rigged it for Holland and Ireland. The last 2 teams you would put with them to be stuck on the island. Something went wrong with the draw there. Significantly, that was the last World Cup draw was done by a citizen, an ordinary person. And since then, they've always been done by FIFA officials. God forgive my cynicism.
Sophia Loren did it.
She did a bit of it. Yeah, she was singing. Pavarotti was singing. Everybody was there. They were all picking balls out, and suddenly they
blaming Sophia Loren
and Pavarotti. They all come up with this chaos.
Then give Sophia a severe dressing down for that.
England, Holland, and Ireland in the same groups on the islands, travelling backwards and forwards between the islands. One interesting point with this week is Egypt were the other team in the group, and that's their last appearance in the World Cup until next Friday. Yeah. They've never been back. Yeah.
And they nearly got through.
They nearly got through.
That because it was so tight, that group. Yeah. I mean, because I went as a fan, and there was apprehension that there might be trouble. But I must say the Italian police did a pretty good job. There was a bit of trouble, but not much. And what they did is the Italians closed the bars the night before games, and in the hours before. Now you could. It was a bit like a Good Friday. There were side doors. And
a lot more than that.
I remember the night before, there was hordes of Irish fans going looking for something to drink, and of course, if you go down that little laneway there, and round in that little square in behind it, you'll find the side door. And sure enough, and there was a party of all parties going on. But I'd say the Italian. I remember it was trouble when the England Belgium game before and after that.
Yeah, there was.
It was in Bologna, which is pretty horrible. But the Italians.
Barry, was it?
Bologna. They played Bologna. I remember I was thinking of going down to it, and I didn't. One of the reasons I didn't go down to it was because of I felt that it could be a bit risky. And I'd seen the English fans in action in West Germany in '88 and in other places, and it's not pretty when they get into full.
It is interesting though how the narrative around English football did sort of change, and I know a lot of that was just police work and
it was also to do with the Hazel and with Bradford and Hillsborough. All these
the ban,
things,
of course, ended the following season after that.
But Gazza's tears started an awful lot. God bless the poor lad himself. He didn't get much out of it in the end, but the pictures of Gazza crying when he knew he couldn't play in the final, even if they won the shootout. That sort of brought football back to the masses, because in Britain people turned away from it because of the stuff Paul was talking about.
It was a hugely important moment.
To give an indication, Tommy, of how it became it wasn't just a football story. It wasn't just about the back page. Jack Charlton has a selection headache whether he picked Ronnie Wheeler or not. Football became on the front page, and no one was better at putting himself on the front page than Eamon. Eamon Dunphy, who appeared out at that press conference. Was that in Genoa? Was it?
He came in after the Egypt game for the press conference before the Holland game.
Before the Holland game, and he came in, and he became the story that day. And I remember that I was on the Evening Herald duty, and I ran the desk, and I said, "You better put him onto the news desk here. Eamon Dunphy and Jack are just having a big set too. We'll hold the paper." And the front page was collar out yet. It was one of those old style, the old ad libs, Eamon Dunphy.
On the dog and bone.
But today went head to head with Jack Charlton, and he called his team on the phone, and it just went on and on and on. Dunphy is upset at the tactics of this Jack Charlton. Charlton stormed off, and you're not a proper journalist. And this was extraordinary stuff. This wasn't.
An Irish journalist giving out to him for disrupting the press conference.
Been aware from covering Ireland in the years leading up to 1990 that there was Dunphy's angle on Jack was a running sore, if you like, or a running theme leading into the finals. When you're over there covering it and all the demands that entails, are you aware, say, when you're covering the Egypt match? I mean, it's not like here where you're on, or nowadays when you're on Twitter and
there was no social media then.
So are you aware that this is another sort of strand to the story that's happening back home while you're covering the football out in Italy?
Yeah,
when you're in the office,
when you're in the office
immediately.
Yeah. Like actually, that match against Egypt, Tommy, I have to say, that was without. Even now, I'm shaking my head. We were trying to recall, was it our worst game? And we think maybe Ireland against Norway in '94 was on.
A close run thing, but I think Egypt was probably worse.
And I remember Jack Charlton after. This sounds terrible. Probably shouldn't say this on air, but Jack was asked about, the Egypt lads. Were you prepared for them? He said the little dark lad with the beard caused us trouble in midfield, and that's what. And Jack, you can't say that. Say what? He just said it again. And that game was played in the mid-afternoon. We were tired, and we hadn't got the way Jack played. We hadn't got the nuance to sort of to break them down, and it put us in a difficult position because we had played reasonably well against England. Then we've had 2 draws, and then we're going to the third game against the Dutch, our old friends from Euro '88, who've kind of had our measure. And it was very much touch and go whether we would get through or not.
And did that thing with Eamon? So you go into the build-up then to the Holland game, which became another high-pressure, dramatic. The last 20 minutes we became pass the ball around as we know. But did it colour the build-up to that? Was it a tense time? Did it influence Jack's mood and the players' mood, or do you remember?
Jack would have moved on very quickly. It was a sideshow. And
once they got the draw as well, it was then irrelevant what had happened.
Yeah, I mean, Jack put it to one side, and it happened 2 days beforehand. The day of the match, I mean, everybody was just behind Ireland, hoping that Jack would pick the right team and get the right result, and we would march on, because we were going into, if we were marching on. And again, as John said earlier, there was another match going on in the islands. We were in Sicily at this stage. There was another match going on in Cagliari.
England were still playing Egypt.
England were playing Egypt, and any 4 results we could have been. We could have come first. We could have come last. And it wasn't even after the game. We weren't quite sure. It was a bit like the night of Windsor some years later. How did Denmark and Spain get on? We weren't quite sure where we were through, where we weren't through.
And as a fan, we even let the lads who were in the press box.
Yeah, they
had a bit more idea what was going on. So we had no idea. And it was only I think about an hour or 2 after we left the ground that we found out. We're going to Genoa.
Yeah.
Oh well, I knew where I was, but where's that? Bad news, lads. It's about 700 miles up at the other end of Italy. How do we get there? We better start going now, lads.
That whole business produced one of the all-time great football quotes, which Mick McCarthy had any amount of chances to deny and never did in all his years as managers. All the year we're talking to him. If you remember, we got back in the goal with Niall Quinn's game. It's now 1-1. And almost at the same time, was it Mark Wright scored
Mark Wright scored against Egypt.
So now everything is
like that.
England are through, Holland and Ireland are through. If it just stays 1-0 and 1-1, now the 1-0 was a bit dodgy because Egypt were obviously trying to get an equaliser, but we could control the 1-1. So basically, the two teams just started tapping the ball around. And the referee called Ruud Gullit and Mick McCarthy, the two captains, over and says, "You have to stop this. You have to play football." And Mick just looked at him and says, "This is the first time we played football in years."
And there's a little poster up to that because Jack brought on Cascarino. He'd been dropped for Noel Quinn. He came on with 10 minutes ago, and Cass wasn't aware that the Anschluss, or the agreement was in place between Gullit and McCarthy, were tippy-tappy, the ball. And suddenly Cass is coming on and he's pushing into people, he's knocking over defenders, and Gullit says, "Hey, I called Mick up. Hey, come over here. That's so." He says, "I have a word to him." He says, "He's not in on it. Hey, Cass, come over here." And all this was going on, but you weren't quite aware of it, but it was only afterwards you realised it was going on.
If Egypt had scored in the lab, would have been a series of tosses. Never mind the toss we have with Ireland, with Holland. Okay, it was only where are we going, but
we'll pause there for the moment, lads. We have to take a quick break. We are getting your texts and your tweets in on your own memories, and just want to hear the little sort of things and memories and incidents and little quirky sort of things that you remember. Somebody, this is Siobhan and Claire, is texted and saying, "I remember Italia 19, the thing to have was the Jacobs Shamrock. It was shake your shamrock for the boys in green, and we had to eat a hell of a lot of Kimberley to get one."
We've all eaten a few of them, Tommy.
Honestly, every brand or every product had some sort of spin-off.
There was a massive tricolour at that World Cup finals brought by people from Galway, fans from Galway, and squeal them up on Bobbleen. And it almost covered the entire terrace behind one of the goals. I don't know where it ever ended up, whether they even brought it home, but it was this famous banner that was unfurled before all our games. It ran for about 3 or 4 years, and a lot of lads from Galway had brought that with them.
Lots more of that. We have to get on to 94, 2002, and lots more other World Cups to talk about as well. Let's take a quick break. You can text us at 53106 or tweet us at Off The Ball as well.
Join that conversation. Text us on 53106. Texts cost 30 cents. Weekends on News Talk, thanks to National College of Ireland. Now enrolling for programmes in business, computing, finance and education this September. Prove to yourself what you can do at National College of Ireland.
The Nissan car combo offer is here. Get not one, but 2 new cars for an amazing €341 per month. That's 2 great cars for one incredible price. Go to nissan.ie to find out more. Nissan. Innovation that excites. Nissan PCP Finance is provided by AIB Finance and Leasing. Allied Irish Banks PLC trading as AIB Finance and Leasing is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. Minimum 10% and maximum 30% deposit required. Warning, you will not own these goods until the final repayment is made.
Enjoy your independent time this Saturday. Summer is here and Weekend has your ultimate guide to Ireland's very best family days out. We've got you covered for kids of all ages and all price ranges. And there's a free ice cream cone for every reader at Supermax. In our World Cup 2018 preview, Aidan O'Hara says perfect number 10s will win out. Irish Independent on Saturday. It's your weekend. Terms and conditions apply.
More rashers, Barry?
Yeah.
Actually, Henry Denny invented the rasher and his sons sailed across oceans to teach people how to cure bacon.
Wow. And their journeys were probably dangerous too. I need to be more courageous like that. Starting now. Pass me my keys. I'm taking the car into town.
But city traffic makes you nervous.
Not anymore. And I'm going to Parallel Park. Go on, Barry. Drive into the city like a fearless negotiator of tricky spaces. Seize the Denny.
This is Brian. Brian has just managed to break his business into a number of new markets. How? By getting his company an internationally recognized certification in quality standards, giving Brian a much greater advantage over his competitors. Yes! Lucky Brian. Find out how you too can get your business on the road to greater success with an internationally recognized seal of approval by visiting nsai.ie today.
Bruce Betting are one of Ireland's leading bookmakers. Download the iOS app today to see why Bruce Betting are giving you more for World Cup 2018. Bruce Betting, your World Cup bookmaker. In store, online, and now on your phone. Please gamble responsibly. See dunlewy.net.
The championship has changed, but the Sunday Independent remains unrivaled in our GAA coverage. Don't miss the best reports and analysis on all of Saturday's games and the best commentary and insight on Sunday's games. From the experts who have worn the jersey and really understand the games. Joe Brawley, Colm O'Rourke, Alan Brogan and Jamesy O'Connor. The Sunday Independent, the complete read on GAA.
2010, the year of bailouts, volcanic ash clouds and those pesky vuvuzelas. It was also the year Nissan launched the 100% electric Leaf. Over 8 years, the Leaf has gone from zero to the world's best-selling electric vehicle and 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 7.9 seconds. Now the all-new 100% electric Nissan Leaf has arrived. 0 left to prove. Book your test drive today at nissan.ie. Nissan, innovation that excites.
Off the ball. This is News Talk.
The stories have continued about World Cups past here on the Saturday panel at Off the Ball. Tommy Martin sitting in for Nathan this afternoon, joined by John Brennan from the Sunday World, Paul Lennon from the Star, Philip Quinn from the Daily Mail. Veterans, as I said earlier, of World Cup glories past. We just talked in there, Siobhan from Clare texted in about the Jacob Shamrock and all the cash-ins that were going on. And that was something, obviously, that the players were involved in. Like, it was just everywhere. It wasn't as strict now in terms of, you can't use this image. Everybody just was like a free-for-all, I guess.
As they were famously called by one FAI president, Opel were the sponsors. But every
Lepos.
The Lepos also. But they were the official sponsors. Arnold O'Byrne became sort of a national institution off the back of that sponsorship.
Lovely man.
But lovely man, Arnold, God bless. An O'Connell's man like me, yeah. But everyone just cashed in on it. And of course, the FA, they couldn't really stop it. They tried to, you have to be an official licensee and whatever. Opel just ran with it. They did really well with it over the years.
They deserved it because they'd come in and back the FAI in 86 when commercial when nobody wanted to go near Irish football. They didn't expect to reap the rewards that they did. But they deserved it because they backed Irish football at the time. And Arnold and our other friend from John Young, and then he was followed by Aidan Doyle,
yeah.
And and they put their money where other people wouldn't.
John, you were saying Jack was particularly active.
Oh, Jack, yeah, as Philip called them, the little learners, he loved them. His famous one was when he went down to Cork one day at the invitation of Murphy's for a few bob, and was down in the thing, and his first 3 references to the point in front of him were Guinness. So someone had to try to jab him in the ribs quietly and say, look, it's Murphy's. How am I supposed to tell the difference between Murphy's Guinness and Guinness's Guinness?
So he compromised.
They compromised, but it became such a thing that Murphy's got so much publicity out of it that they were laughing all the way because he was going around calling it Guinness.
So, but your colleague and our colleague, Mark Lawrenson, was the official brand ambassador for Guinness, I remember, in 1994, and he was going around giving us all T-shirts and little caps and to have us tugged out. So in case...
He'd obviously finished at that stage.
Yeah, and he was there for the BBC and probably the Irish Times at the time. And but Tom McGuinness and Jack in Orlando before that World Cup, Jack had a suite in the hotel, and actually enough he had the best room in the hotel, which was a 2-story suite. So we heard about, one time we bumped into Jack and Michael Hyland, who was the FAI, was he the president at the time?
Yeah.
And then we had a few drinks in this bar and restaurant. They said, we're going to have a quiz tonight, will you come back to the room? So we went back to Jack's suite, about 4 or 5 journalists, Morris Setters, Jack, a few FAI people, and there was a quiz. A fella from down the country had sent Jack a booklet of homemade quiz questions about football.
Keep the lads occupied,
So Jack loved this, and he was quiz master and also on the winning team. He had to be on the winning team. And at one stage, he told Morris Setters come up with a bizarre answer. He said, "Morris, you just shut up. You know nothing."
And while all this was going on, as Jack was Bambergas going, he had a little keg, a mini keg. Yeah. And we were, what do you have, lads? And he was a master of pulling a pint, no problem. We all dropping the black stuff, it was great. And we were asking about this. I'm not sure now, was it Guinness Stout or Murphy Stout?
But it was Guinness.
It was Guinness. Yeah. But it came from, and he says, and they've told me, if I finish it, I can have another one, he says.
But you needed another one.
At the end, the quiz ended in carnage at the end of the night. I don't know who won it.
Is that the time Tony Cascarino insisted that EastEnders was set in Walford, and none of the lads would believe him? There was a famous quiz out of this lad's book from County Down, where the players had a quiz. Jack was trying to keep them going one night, and the question was, in what suburb of London is East Ender set? And Cascarino kept saying Walford, which is where it's set, right? And somebody, was it Townsend or somebody else said, no, it's not. And they nearly came to blows over the thing, you know. Crazy.
But the main thing was that Jack pulled the points, he asked the questions, and he had to be on the winning team. And once
everybody else was happy.
And because he had to be on the winning team, he was pulling the points, and everyone was happy. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like an absolute roller coaster, you know, and like a real incredible adventure. Like, if you're getting invited into the manager's room for quizzes and he's putting kegs, like, people would say that's you know, by today's standards, where it's much more adversarial between the team and the management, would say, and the media, particularly the current manager. Was that a kind of a cosy relationship? Did you find it hard then to maybe criticise if you felt selections were wrong, or, you know, at the time, like, no, did it feel like everybody was on the same team?
I think it was easier because we were winning, so there wasn't as much criticism needed. But even that World Cup, there were selections.
There were selections, yeah.
And the performances that weren't good as well. They had to be criticised.
I'll tell you another little story, and I have to be careful what language I use. But Jack was very close, and is very close to Gabriel Egan, who was the RT radio commentator. And Gabriel would always get out of Jack's room the night before the game. He used to have a little arrangement, have a little nightcap. And this became something that evolved over the years. And Gabriel kept quiet. He would hear from Jack the absolute inner story, what was going on inside the camp, and what team Jack was going to pick the next day. Because Jack generally picked his team on the day. He didn't release it the day before, but he would know the day before. And Gabriel told us this story on the day before we played Italy, and that leads on to the start of the matches now in '94. And Jack tapped in the room, "Come in, Gabriel." And Gabriel says, I walk in, and Jack is sitting there, and his head is in his hands, and he's shaking his head. He says, "Are you all right?" He says, "No." He says, "Gabriel, I've got a piece of paper here with the list of names on it, and we're buggered." He says, "What do you mean we're buggered?" "We're rattly buggered," he said. He said, "We've got no defenders." He says, "Look at it." He says, "Moran is injured. He's buggered." He says, "McGrath's only got one shoulder. He's buggered." He says, "And Bab, he thinks he can play, and I'm going to have to play the bugger." He says, "We're buggered." He says, "What am I going to do?" I gave him, says, "You know what we're going to do, Jack? We're going to have a pint." "That's a good idea." And they pulled a pint, and they had a little chat, a little natter, and they bounced ideas off it. And by the end of the night, not only did Gabriel know the team, but Jack's mood had come around a little bit. And the next day, Paul McGrath went out, and for me, and I was asked for my other memory, this is my second memory, for me, Paul McGrath's performance that day, with a stiff shoulder, he hadn't trained properly, and he was 34 years of age.
His knees were at him.
And he turned into performance in the heat that day against Italy, whether it was Baggio or whether it was any Italian who got near him. Simeone. No, the guy who played AC Milan up front.
Inzaghi.
Inzaghi, was it?
Inzaghi. He came on, I think. Yeah.
But he just marshalled the defence.
And just that Milan team. Oh, sorry, the Italian team had 7 of the Milan team that won the European Cup a few weeks earlier.
And McGrath was masterful. And I think of all his performances for Ireland, that one, when it was, again, the first game, Tommy, this goes back to my point, the first game sets the tone for how you're going to do. And we never lost a game in the first game, you know, in any of the 3 World Cups, you know, we never lost one.
The stat there is massive. If you lose, for all the countries this week, starting on Thursday, if you lose your first game, it's nigh on impossible.
All 3 of you have, you know, in one way or another, picked that one. Ray Houghton 94 versus Italy for you, Paul. Houghton for you, John. McGrath's performance in the same game. I mean, it did feel that things went. That was sort of the height, and things went down like that. But certainly that after that. But certainly that giant stadium experience is something that people, you know, that sense of the whole Irish dominating the stadium, the build up to that. Was that almost like a peak of the whole thing? You know, it was a kind of never.
It was, Tommy. That was our World Cup final. It was only Italy's first game. Now, it wasn't. Italy kind of, in some ways, ground away to the final, and in the final against Brazil, they didn't want to play, and they killed the final, and Brazil deserved to win it. But what's funny, it wasn't a vintage Brazilian team, but they had Romario and Bebeto for who were, but they didn't get much of the ball in that final.
Dunga was the captain.
And it went to penalties, and of course, Baggio missed the penalties. But that was and we went in that day. We knew to be a big Irish crowd, but I think it was 77,000, and it was easily 60, wasn't it?
Couldn't believe it. None of us could believe
Irish.
To me, that was one of the greatest days of my professional career. Without a shadow of a doubt, one of the greatest events or things I've covered. It'll take something to beat it.
I mean, I presume in the sense that it had everything. It had everything. The achievement, the setting.
The performance by McGrath, the goal, the setting, the heat. Again, it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, wasn't it? Something like that local time.
And remember, we were playing the team that had knocked us out 4 years ago. on their home turf with all the advantages.
And I remember,
and we'd beaten them.
Coming out, talking about, you mentioned Moran there earlier, coming out of the mix zone after the match, and we're trying to talk to the players, get interviews, do things and whatever. And of course the match kicked off at 9 p.m. Irish time. It was 4 p.m. over there, 9 p.m. Irish time, and it was a beautiful evening and everyone was out and there was barbecues and then watching the match and everything like that and whatever. And as we come out, Kevin Moran, who was injured for that World Cup basically and didn't play a minute of it, Kevin Moran said to me, I wish I was standing outside Mulligan's now with a pint in my hand. Because it was now about 11:20 Irish time, and there was probably about 3,000 people outside Mulligan's with a pint in their hand celebrating.
And that leads on to another story, because Jack gave the players the night off. They all went off and had a few drinks, and wherever they went to, whatever pub they went to, some of them were standing against some sort of an ivy. Remember this? There was a sort of a poison ivy trellis. And the players came home. The next day they had blotches on them. Cascarino and Townsend had big red blotches, and they weren't feeling bad, but they looked terrible. Yeah. And 3 or 4 of the players had little blemishes as well. They were all
on their arms and lower legs.
Wherever they were standing. There wasn't anything we ate. There wasn't anything we drank. Where were we? And they were up against this trellis. There was an ivy thing on it, and they got a reaction to it. And of course, one of our journalists, one of our great friends, Robbie Reid, got word that he'd seen the players, and they came up in the press conference. The lads all look a little bit odd. I know it's okay. They're on a medication. They'll be fine. And Robbie for the Sun, the big headline that the Irish a flesh-eating
flesh-eating bug
threatens Irish World Cup hopes. And on the front page of the Sun, and Jack picked it up. And he says, "Oh, there's Ruby." The next day, Jack went bananas at it. Yeah. And of course, the next day they were all perfectly well. And Robbie went, "Hey, it was yesterday's story."
And the other thing I can say about Jack would have an argument with somebody
and then forget it. Yeah.
And then within 5 minutes, he'd forgotten he had the arm. He'd moved on so quickly.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. That's what I was getting at earlier.
He was very good.
The atmosphere around the camp. Where I presume you have to write.
You were also staying, Tommy, in the same hotel.
Yeah.
Travelled with them.
Yeah. So we went over, and the Czechs beat us in our farewell match 3-1.
Oh, we were terrible.
And it was dreadful. But before that, we'd beaten Germany 2-0 away.
And Holland.
And Holland 1-0 away.
Tommy Coyne.
This team probably actually maybe peaked a little bit before the final. So we went about 2 weeks to acclimatise. We went to Orlando, which was the clever thing.
Remember, we knocked the European champions out of the group.
We flew over from Dublin to New York. You couldn't fly direct to Orlando in those days, and there was a few drinks had by everybody. But we were sitting amongst the players and FAI officials on the main body of the play. And then, of course, and then on the second leg down, there was a few more drinks taken, and then people started throwing missiles at each other. I remember Roy Keane being a few rows behind me, and he's scrunching up parts of the in-flight magazine, and he was, who got hit now? Bonner. And he'd throw up, and he hit Bonner in the head. And of course, Roy being this little fella he was sitting down, and then he'd go for somebody else, Whelan or
McCarthy.
So this was all, we were all watching this with great amusement. About this was going
we were giggling away as well.
Maybe the current generation of players, if they're listening or watching today, will find this astonishing. But when we got on the plane, there was no block booking. Everyone was just everywhere. And Mick Bourne, the team physio. Oh, another story about Mick. Mick Bourne, the team physio. Right. Yeah. The team physio was going around asking people would they mind moving so that the team could sit together. Ma'am, would you mind? Tommy, would you? I'm trying to get that. I want a card school. So eventually I got Ronnie Whelan beside me because I was in the sort of middle. Ronnie was on the edge, and there was someone over there, and they were having a card school on the aisle while the waitress or the hostess was going up and down with the trolley. The boys were playing a hand of cards. But Ronnie sits beside me. He would know me. How are you, Ronnie? And I said, listen, Ronnie, we'll do this the easy way. We're stuck with each other for 7 hours. We'll do the interview now. I have my notebook. We'll get it over in 5 minutes. And when I put the notebook away, Ronnie, we're free. So Ronnie gave me an interview, whatever I wanted. That a great talk. And then I put the thing back in my pocket, and out came the cans of Budweiser. And that was it. Like, it's so different to now. Yeah. But were the Irish team anyway unprofessional? Not in a million years. They were brilliant. When they got their mind on what they were doing, they switched. They kind of had this thing to switch on and switch off. And when they switched off, they enjoyed themselves. And when they knew it was time to switch on, they switched on. There wasn't this kind of pressure where the lads are kind of on eggshells.
Yeah, it's funny. It's an interesting thing in the build-up to the rugby this week. There was talk about. I think Brian O'Driscoll was on with the lads last night about when you're in that touring situations. They would say in rugby you have to have that off time when they let them go and jet skis and enjoy themselves a bit. Do you think the Irish team of that era, because of the great stories about the nights on the beer, if you like, that their professionalism or their ability or their hardened ability to be a really quality football team and to prepare properly is kind of brushed over, or people don't make as much of it.
Because I heard Nathan talking to the lads who done either Kevin Ray and Ronnie were on the Euro '88 reminiscence, and that was he had to bring up that point, and it was completely the opposite. They were. First of all, they were top-class players. Secondly, they were complete and utter professionals, and they played for their club, but they played for their country. And that's I must say, over the years since then, there's very few Irish players I've seen that haven't put it in for the shirt. But they were, and as John says, when they were in camp and when they played, yes, there were nights out, but it was a night out, and then and there might be one or two drinks another night. But Jack did that to break the boredom, and just to bring up the modern day. Unfortunately, Giovanni Trapattoni. From a completely different culture. In 2012, he had this team stuck in training camps in Italy and in Poland and in Hungary and in Dublin. By the time we got to that Euros, there were other problems as well, but the players were so bored stiff by the whole experience, mentally flagged. Yeah, and I think physically they're a bit flagged as well.
A couple more tweets. Paul Morrissey tweets, USA 94 watched the Mexico game on the street, whole road watching together over barbecue and beers. Again, that whole thing of the country coming together that you mentioned earlier, John. Niall Dunn on Twitter, when Sheedy scored, my dad threw my newborn baby brother up in the air with excitement.
Good on you.
Funny enough, never took to the football after that. Not a big surprise, I suppose. No name in this text. Really good to hear these memories. Ideal for a long journey, so nobody can disturb me as I wallow in this. Coming from a non-playing perspective is really engrossing. Just on that thing about 94, just professionally, is it because you're talking about deadlines there? It's a late kick-off, and you must have been under real pressure to get that story. Because people are, people want to wake up and get the story on the Sunday morning, don't they?
It's an incredible. It was a Saturday night.
You were in Sunday Press.
I was doing the Sunday Press. It was an incredible story because, unlike now, newspapers printed so many copies then they had to start early. So the presses would have been printing around midnight. We would have held everything back because there's no point going without the game. So we'd have held everything back.
300,000.
Oh, 400,000. 400,000. And you had to print them through the night. We didn't stop printing, I remember, that Sunday morning at 7 o'clock, I heard, when I got home. But we were under huge pressure. And of course, the longer the game went on at 1-0, the more you sense the story happening, and the more you said, if these equalise now, the last 500 words I've written have to be thrown out, and I have to write 500 more to talk about a draw, or maybe if the Italians get too late on, completely banjaxed. So you're writing, and you're hoping not to hang yourself, and you're hoping we hold on, and you're hoping the match. That was a struggle. I'd never forget that night. And when Kevin Moran said, I want to be outside Mulligan's having a pint, I nearly said, I wouldn't mind being with you. But, that's the price you paid for what you talked about earlier, living people's dreams. I suppose the job the three of us have is everyone's ideal job when a big sporting event comes around. And the World Cup is the biggest. The Olympics is fantastic, but some of the sports in the Olympics, people, weightlifting or sumo wrestling or whatever the else are, they don't hack them. They understand the basics of most of the sports. But unless we have a superstar, you can watch and admire Usain Bolt or something like that. But unless we have a Eamon Coughlin or a John Tracy or the boxers going well, it kind of doesn't bring the whole country together. When it happens, like Katie Taylor, it does. But the World Cup is just the event. It's the sporting event.
On the 94 World Cup, my little story is, because you talk about professionalism, Tommy, that's and journalists have to be professional, and the players have to be professional. And Jack, for all his quiz nights and his kegs, he was professional. Yeah. And this leads on to my little story, which involves John Brennan. After our group had finished the 94 World Cup, and it still remains the only World Cup to this day, John, as you know, where all four teams finished on the same number of points, with the same number of goals scored and against. The four teams all finished level. Incredible. Never happened before. And we edged out, I think,
Norway.
We edged out Italy because we'd beaten them. So we came second in our group. So we were second in our group.
Three went through from the four, Norway missed out.
Norway missed out, even though they won the first match. So Mexico, ourselves, and Italy went through. We knew we were second. So we knew we were second in our group. So second in Group E plays the winner of Group F. Group F is on the next day. So let's turn to Group F. Who's in Group F? We have a little look at it. The Belgians are top. They've played 2 matches. They've got 6 points. And then the Dutch are struggling. And the Saudis, they're not doing too badly either. So John Brennan, my good friend and colleague, has a word with Jack. He says, Jack, you know what you should do here, Jack? You should go to Washington tomorrow to watch Belgium play Saudi Arabia.
Because that's where we're going to be playing.
Because we're going to be playing either Belgium or Saudi Arabia. The Belgians only need a draw to go through, and they've won their first 2 games handy. And the Saudis actually, if they win, they'll top the group, barring a bizarre result involving the Dutch. So it's 99% certain. So Jack says, this fellow knows what he's talking about.
Because Jack wasn't great in that sort of act.
That was one of Jack's few weaknesses.
So he says to John, will you organise a flight? I'm going to go from Orlando up to Washington, and I'm going to watch the Belgians against the Saudis, and then we'll know.
No, he stopped on the way down. We were in New York. We had played Norway that night. New York. Yeah, okay, we're going back to Orlando, but he stopped. He decided to go New York, Washington, Orlando.
He goes to Washington. He watches this game, and lo and behold,
Saudi Arabia wins.
Saudi Arabia got a late winner, and they win 2-1, and that's okay. But unfortunately, the Dutch have got an even later winner down below against Morocco. And where was that match? In Orlando. In Orlando. So Jack is up in Washington, and somebody's realised, he says, I've just watched Belgium play Saudi Arabia. We're not playing either of those teams. Who are we playing? He finds out we're playing the Dutch. Where were they playing? They're playing in bloody Orlando. I should have been bloody Orlando. So get me out of here. So he goes to hightails it to the airport. There's no late flight out of Washington back to Orlando. So he sits there. Typical Jack. One of the lads said, with John Givens with him, we get a hotel, Jack, for 3 or 4 hours. There's no point. He said, so Jack sits down, gets to make so comfortable as possible. And the early flight to Orlando, he's got 4 or 5 hours. There's a fella sitting beside him.
From Yorkshire.
From Yorkshire.
And he's doing the same.
He says, hey up. He says, are you, I am. He says, what are you, have you got a fag? Yeah, yes. So they went in and out of the terminal onto the smoking area, the two of them smoking for a couple of hours. And Jack got back into the hotel and landed the next morning, and there was steam coming out of his ears. He says, where's that little, where's that booger? Who was it? Which was that booger that's sitting up in Washington? He says, where is he?
There he is.
And he comes in, he walks into the hotel, and there's a Star Trek convention on.
Yeah. Star Trek. Mr. Spock was there. Leonard Nimoy was there.
There's 2,000 Trekkies have descended on Orlando. 1,900 in our hotel, and they're wandering around as Jack walks in.
Looking for me. And all he can see, he can see Dr. He can see Spock. He can see Klingons on the starboard bow. He can see Uhura. And where is that little? Bugger this! I'm going to bed. And you dodged a bullet that day.
I did, yeah.
You're probably in disguise.
No, I wasn't. The story. What Philip tells the story, and it's correct. What he leaves out is, by going to the match, Jack did see the goal that, believe it or not, was voted the 3rd best goal ever in the World Cup.
Al-Jaber, wasn't it?
Saeed Al-Oweiran. He did a Maradona on it.
Maradona got from his own penalty area, didn't he?
Ran from his own penalty area, around 3 of them, and that was the winning goal for Saudi Arabia against Belgium.
That was some consolation.
It wasn't much consolation.
We were talking about that Italian team and the Milan link. I just googled it up here. It's amazing when you read the names now. Pagliuca in goal, Costa Curta, Maldini, Baresi, Tassotti, Albertini, Dino Baggio, Donadoni, Ivani, and then Baggio and Signori, and it was Massaro.
That's the one.
Daniel Massaro was
the Massaro was the striker who came on.
7 in total.
Yeah, that was an Italian team. Just finally on 94.
Crazy to think they're not there this year, isn't it?
Yeah, it's incredible. It really is incredible.
Not there.
So things go south then, I suppose. After that, we go out to the Dutch. It's 2002 when we get back there again, and it's fair to say, I mean, look, don't want to mention the S word too much, but it's hard to avoid it. And what you were talking about there earlier with the atmosphere around the team and that closeness between the players and the media, or I suppose a good working relationship, we'll say, where you can sit and play and Ronnie will give you an interview and then you'll have a beer with him. The barbecue in 2002 comes up, and it has come up.
I think that was a brilliant, great idea. Yeah. McCarthy and... we arrived on a Saturday finally in Saipan in the afternoon. The barbecue was for the Sunday night. They did a little bit of training on the Sunday morning. 4 or 5 was there, and we were watching them train. And we knew from the minute we arrived on this training ground, it wasn't up to scratch. It wasn't anywhere near the required quality. So that was a problem. Other stuff about the gear arriving late to me was always a misnomer. I arrived 24 hours late, so what?
They had enough for that day.
Enough to do. Yeah. So everybody was up for the barbecue, and I thought it was a good idea by McCarthy because they relaxed the players, and that one thing that was McCarthy was good at. He was good at a lot of other things as well, getting the downtime for the players, and he gave them days off as well. And it was one very good story involving Philip here during the barbecue. There was some act went up near the end of the barbecue, and it's a magician or a musician, and he invited you up on the stage.
Yeah. There was fire and swords and various things.
They were throwing knives, you know, it was one of these knife throwing. And he said, and the fella says, well, I throw a knife at your colleague here. What's your name, Philip? Yeah. And from the back of the hall came that lovely deep Cork intonation from Mr. Roy Morris Keane. Throw it, make sure you hit that.
Off with his head.
You know. And Roy didn't want to be there because doing social stuff with media or even with some of his colleagues wasn't his thing. There were other issues going on. But I thought that was... good idea by McCarthy. I remember we ended up having a few late drinks in
the Beefeater
bar.
A few early ones too, as it turned out.
And players involved.
Players. That was one of the last nights, Tom. We were all players and media. Had a great...
So that was a watershed. You know, not saying that it was a bad idea to organise a barbecue, but what happened and, you know, with Roy and everything that happened, was that a watershed in terms of players and media, and were things never the same again?
Well, when Mick left and then Brian came in and Stan, so things changed a little bit. But I just want to just talk upon my third moment, which was Matt Holland's first goal against Cameroon, and it wouldn't necessarily be a standout moment. But the reason I picked it was because of all the brouhaha in the build-up to that match. When the players, they'd lost their captain, they'd lost their best player, and some were relieved, some were frightened, some were petrified, but no one knew what was going to happen. They're now jumping over the cliff without Roy Keane to drive them on. And had we lost that game, McCarthy would have been slaughtered, and the players would probably have been completely demoralised. They'd have no self-confidence going forward. And in that game, again we were a goal down, and again we came back and we scored an equaliser. And it was a lovely strike, by the way, by Holland. I think either him or Kinsella, one of them wouldn't have played. I'm not quite sure.
I think Kinsella probably wouldn't have
played, but Keane would have played. And that goal, from that moment, McCarthy was able to come in and say, well done, lads. He spoke to the media. Look, Roy is gone. We've started the World Cup. We've got a draw. We've got a goal. Let's look ahead to the Germany game. And they built that game with confidence, and we got to the last 16. And who knows where we could have gone after that.
So there was a palpable sense within the squad in the build-up to that game, like there was that sort of trepidation.
There was obviously, without going into it had dominated, obviously here, back over in Ireland, but over there amongst the players in the camp. And I think they were mentally drained going into that game. But at half-time that day, McCarthy made a really good impassioned speech, and so did Matty Holland. Matty Holland emerged as a leader at half-time that day, and then, funny enough, he got the goal. And later on that day, in that game, we nearly won it. A great shot by the player who's called up late into the squad, whose name just evades me at the moment. He got the late call off for Mark Kennedy, the Millwall player, midfielder. Struck the post for a really good shot from about 30 yards. Stephen Reid hit the post. We could have won. We were lucky against Germany, but we kept playing away, and we got that.
The one thing Paul mentions about the playing facilities in Saipan, that was a huge issue. The barbecue wasn't an issue. The playing pitches were a huge issue.
They were poor.
They were not of the required standard, because there was no football pitch in Saipan. There was no tradition of football. It was an American Army R&R island, basically. Ironically, had Roy stayed a couple of days, when we got to Isimo, I have never seen a training facility like Isimo.
The grass was cut to the exact length, and there was the exact same type of grass and grain and soil as it was in all the stadiums. Security was 24/7. You couldn't get near the team hotel. Everything that Roy would have wanted, he would have got.
Isimo was superb.
That's one of my regrets.
And the Irish adopted the people of Isimo, the FAI, if you like, so well that for years after, until his untimely death a few years ago, Noel O'Reilly, who was an FAI coach, he was Brian Kerr's coach, but he was an FAI coach, he went back every summer, and did coaching classes with the kids of Isimo at the request of the FAI. They really made the effort in Isimo. I think Saipan was just seen as R&R. If you look at the dates of the matches, that World Cup started on the 31st of May. Here we are on the 8th.
We'd already played 2 games
by now. Because they were afraid of the, of course, typical bidding for the World Cup. You don't tell your bad things. Early July is the monsoon season in Japan and Korea, so they decided to get the World Cup over before it would happen. They started it very early, so there was very little time for these long training camps. And Mick McCarthy decided, what I'll do, I'll bring the lads out from R&R with their families to Saipan. We'll have a bit of training, a bit of fun, but then we'll go, and the families can go away, and we'll do the serious stuff in Isimo for about 10 days. Because I think we played in the first game in Japan in that tournament.
The second day.
Yeah, the first game in Japan,
and we played
in
the second
Korea.
day.
I think just as as history has settled and everybody's overriding, I'm sure even the people involved, overriding feeling about it is just simply regret about what could have happened. So I'm definitely, absolutely not going to rehash everything that happened. But just professionally, again, those few days, you know, without getting into he said, he said, whatever, you know, you've again got this huge story at home. It's happening in Saipan, but it is happening as much at home as well. Yeah. So dealing with that, and again, you're just getting into, I think, the early sort of internet days and
you're dealing with a huge time difference in the wrong direction
as well.
Yeah, in the wrong direction.
It was 9 hours in Saipan and 8 in Korea and Japan. You just mentioned that is very interesting. I remember in 1998, I saw the first version of the internet I saw. At the World Cup 20 years ago, where there were quotes from press conferences in Lyon suddenly appeared on a computer in a media centre in Paris or Lyon or Lille or wherever. That was the first time. By 2002, all the major broadcasters had websites, and so had the most of the papers, and there were some independent ones. So that changed. The other thing was about that story was, part of that story was happening, of course, in Dublin and in Manchester and in London.
That's where Keane was.
Keane had come back, and the thoughts about the possibility of him coming back, there was things going on in Dublin, in Manchester with Ferguson and Keane, with Michael Kennedy, his solicitor and advisor in London, and other people. So it was a global story. And that made it, I think that also didn't help in trying to resolve it, without going into the details, because there's time zones.
And to give one perspective of it as well, I just have two observations to make. When we got to Japan, before the Cameroon game, the international journalists covering the World Cup they all wanted to know. There's only one story before the World Cup. It was Roy Keane. Every World Cup, there's generally something happens beforehand. Yeah. Somebody either fails a drugs test, or someone gets left out, or someone does something silly. The big story in that World Cup was Roy Keane. Manchester United, best player, has been sent home by his manager from the Irish team. And all the journalists, how has this happened? What's happening? What can you tell us? That was their story. So it wasn't the front page of the Star or the Press or the Indo or the Mail. It was the front page on every sports paper all around the world, and that's how big it was.
So the Irish press group
we were the story.
A huge international.
And it was the biggest. It was the biggest story I've ever worked on, and it gave me the biggest buzz, because you're working 22, 24 hours, because of the fact that it was happening in 3, 4 parts of the world, and it was an amazing. And thankfully, as Philip said, at halftime, and that goal in the first game lifted it. And I actually parked it until September, when we lost 4-2.
It was always going to come back.
When we lost 4-2 in Russia, suddenly it came back. It was back on the agenda.
It's extraordinary, that, wasn't it? That's
you mentioned something earlier, Tommy, and it's the one thing I would say about Saipan and that whole Japan thing and whatever, and use the word weak World Cup about 1990. It was a kind of a staid World Cup. 2002, because of all the circumstances we talked, was a really weak World Cup. Turkey went miles into it. South Korea went miles into it.
A dodgy decision.
A dodgy decision. Italy were knocked out on a ropey decision with Trapp as the manager, ironically.
Byron Moreno.
Spain were knocked out in the match after they beat us. France, the champions, didn't even get out of the group. Yeah. Argentina went out Argentina didn't get out of the group either.
England got knocked out earlier.
England got the quarter-final. Brazil, where they're normal level. But what I'm saying is,
Germany team that got to the final was by
very
their
average.
Very average.
They had a lot of players suspended for that final. So they didn't, although they were the better side for an hour in that game.
No, yeah. To me, that World Cup and the things Roy says, let's stop going for a party and let's go and win the thing. The irony was, I won't say we'd win the World Cup, but that was a World Cup in which we could have gone a long, 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 long way.
And on that point, John, and you're right, and on that point, and again, we're not taking sides here, because we're trying to, as journalists over there, you're trying to be neutral. And journalists were fighting with each other, by the way, as well. I know families at home were fighting, journalists were fighting over McCarthy's right, Keane is right. But Ray Tracy, in his wisdom, said to me over there at the end of the World Cup, and we miss him dearly, the late Ray Tracy, he said, I got a lot of flack over because I was the one who was organising the travel to Saipan. And now, he wasn't in charge of the gear, but he was involved in it. And he said, I make one point, Winner, he said, in the 4 games we played, we finished strong in each one.
It wasn't to do with fitness.
Saipan did serve a purpose in terms of the humidity was very intense. It wasn't as intense when we got to Japan or Korea. And Mick didn't run the bejesus out of them in Saipan. And Brie had a couple of good sessions. But he said by the time they got to Japan, they were fit. And those 4 games, Cameroon, Germany, Saudi Arabia and Spain, Saudi Arabia was different because we're on the front foot from the word go. But the other 3 games, we finished strong in each of those games. And that wasn't a coincidence.
McCarthy's preparations and the FA and their medical advice was no problem.
And one game particularly, and you've all picked the Robbie Keane's goal against Germany as well. It's just been an incredible moment. Niall from Carlow texts in, says, my wife was on the Dublin bus on the Malahide Road coming into Fairview when Robbie Keane scores against Germany in the World Cup. The driver got out and did press-ups on the road in celebration.
That's fantastic.
Well, I'll tell you my story about that. Myself and my colleague Roy Curtis from the Sunday World, you sit with the guy, you're always put with the guys, and if there's a protocol for where they give the press seats at the World Cup, and if your team is playing, you get the best ones, and then if your team is in the group, you get the next best ones, and then the rest get and so on and whatever. But because this was Ireland v Germany, we were all in the front row, and then the television guys were in front of us. Well, when Robbie's ball hit the back of the net, myself and my colleague Roy Curtis shot up. It was one of the few times again I lost it as a professional journalist. Shot up, but unfortunately the desks were something like this. They weren't very big, and we shot up and right out and over. And I just pushed myself onto the fella, but Roy went right over the top of the fella. And the fella just happened to be Ron Atkinson. Big Ron doing ITV. And the fella I pushed was Clive Tilsley. And if you listen, BBC were covering the match, but ITV did it and the 2 boys were doing it. And if you get a load of the tape, when the ball, and Robbie Keane has scored. Oh, what a finish, Ireland have got to win. And our Irishmen falling all over me. That was me. That was Roy and myself trying to push ourselves back up and get back up on the seat. But we shot up in the air and over and landed on top of Big Ron.
Brilliant stuff.
Hasn't been not the better of it since, John.
I don't think he is anyway.
It was all downhill for Ron after that, wasn't it? So just to finally round off on that, they go to the round 16 extra time against Spain, and I watched that in a pub in Dublin. I never forget the deflation because they lost a shootout, and it was oh my god, it was the party was over.
Middle of a Sunday, wasn't it?
And it was a damp day, and suddenly the blinds went up and they turned the channels, and there was an Ulster Championship match on. I think it was Derry. It might have been Derry and Tyrone or in Clones, and there was nobody at it, and it was just this is it. The carousel has come to an end.
Story's over.
You're in the mix zone and you're talking to the players there after everything that's happened before the World Cup, the emotional pressure of that, what they'd done in the 4 games, the results they dug out. I mean, it must have been just a real sense of deflation and of an absolute, or was there pride, or where was it at that point?
It was a mix. The pride had gone so far, but definitely they were shattered because the other thing to us that we were a man up. For all of extra time.
All of extra time, yeah.
And this when McCarthy didn't. One of his weaker moments in that. I remember looking from his press box and saying, "We've an extra man out here," and then I thought I was wrong. And I'm counting them for the 2 teams. No, we have an extra. And then we realised when the Spanish guys had gone off injured.
Hence, they weren't playing for. They were playing for penalties. And Mick was playing for penalties, and had he been a bit more, no, he's never come out publicly and said, I knew or I didn't know.
We attacked a fair bit. Duffer destroyed them in that game. He just never found someone with a cross.
In extra time. I'm not sure if Mick was aware of it. Maybe aware as extra time went on.
As it went on.
But initially, I'm not sure he was.
The first 5 or 10 minutes he wasn't.
I think they certainly knew by half time of extra time. They knew they were playing 10 men and they really pushed forward. Damien destroyed the guys. One thing about penalty shootouts, not penalties, penalty shootouts that I've often think, and if you look back to the famous one in 90, Packie, who was Shay Given's goalkeeping coach in 2002, Packie goes the right way for every penalty. Because what a team does when they're taking their penalties is you put your Hadji, in Romania's case, up first. You put your guy who's certain to score, and then you got the dodgy ones 4 and 5. Packie dived for every penalty. He didn't dive. He dived where the ball was going. Of course, he'd no chance with Hadji and the other guy, the Jordanescu or whatever he was. But for 3 and 4, he starts to get his hands to them. He starts going the right way and getting very close. And then famously, he saves Timoftes. But subliminally, you're telling the opposition, I'm not diving to the other corner to allow you roll it in there. I'm going the way you're putting it. You better stick it in the corner. And of course, that puts the pressure on them to stick it right in the corner. And then they miss the post. Shay dived for every penalty in that shootout. dived the wrong way.
Like he went in advance.
Mendieta and these guys just walked up. He dived that way and they strolled that way.
Mendieta went down through the middle and it wasn't even particularly well struck penalty.
No, they weren't. And that's what. And Packie was the goalkeeping coach at the time. Surely he would have said to Shea, dive for the ball. Don't dive.
Wait till they kick it.
Can I say Packie's modus operandi in penalty shootouts was that he used to read. Because in 1990, getting videos, videos were in for 10 years, 13 years, but actually getting videos of opposition players taking penalties was very, very hard to do. The Stoke Bucharest had won the European Cup a few years earlier in a penalty shootout, and there was a few of them were on the team, but I think it was only one fellow who took a penalty.
Yeah.
So Packie said, all I'm going to do here is watch him coming up, and that was the way he judged it. And if he felt that he was going to hit it to his left, he went that way and to his right. But I must actually ask Shea again, what was his feeling on
it? He just said he was.
We are going to be running out of time soon, and I could probably continue this until 6 o'clock. I don't know. No, apparently we have to.
No, I'm down to cover the battle of the bathroom. You have to let me out of here.
Absolutely. But listen, so I'll give you all. I'll give you all. I don't know if we've covered all of your memories. Give you all one more sort of summing up. Whether it can be your, as I said, childhood jumpers for goalposts moment, or it could be you're with Ireland, or you're covering another team. I know, I think, is it yourself, John, who have Bergkamp's goal against Argentina in 98?
That would be my off the ball moment, if you'll pardon the pun. It's the greatest goal I've ever seen scored in the flesh. Just as it ticked into injury time in a World Cup quarter-final, Frank de Boer plays this 70-yard ball. Bergkamp takes it down with one touch inside the defender and slams it to the roof of the net. It's not the best goal ever. It's the best goal I've ever seen in the flesh.
I go to 2006. I was at the France-Brazil match, and Frankfurt I was, and the French outplayed the Brazilians playing their own, and the French had started slowly in that term, beat the Spanish 4-1 in the second round, and then played the Brazilians and played them off the pitch, and they got one goal from and Thierry Henry snuck into far, but Zinedine Zidane in midfield that day was imperious, and during the second half when they were running the Brazilians ragged, he got the ball, flicked it on his foot, flicked it over his head and ran past two Brazilian midfielders, and then controlled the ball as it came out of the sky on his foot. That's just a number. He was at his peak. I always felt very sad that they should have won that.
That was he'd come back into the team and it was going to be a crowning glory, wasn't it? And he'd scored the penalty.
And they were the most for us because they were frightened they were going to lose in Dublin.
They were the most entertaining team in that World Cup by a mile, and they were done by penalty.
I saw that match on telly because, again, talking about production difficulties, The Office insisted I go to England, Portugal that afternoon. The one where Ronaldo winked at Wayne when he got Wayne Rooney sent off. That was on that afternoon. That game, the Paul Town, I remember seeing it on the telly. I was finished work, sitting in a bar somewhere, as you do, watching the match.
Yeah.
But those two games were the same day.
Mine is a little offbeat one, and it relates to the '98 World Cup final. And I covered it with Paul, and we went to the final, Stade de France, and we're in the press box early, which is most unusual for us, as we have a reputation to uphold, and the teams are being announced.
And a dramatic late entrance.
Or a bit like today.
Very dramatic.
And an hour before kick-off, the FIFA guys are going around with their blazers, and I always wonder, how come these guys don't sweat? And I'm sitting here dribbling and drowned and sweat. Anyway, they're giving it the team list, and we're picking it up, and I'm looking at it, and I'm going, Jesus, Ronaldo's not playing. Obviously, he must have that injury scare, whatever it is, he's not playing anyway. Yeah, that's a bit of a blown out to the Brazilians, So we're yapping away. About 20 minutes later, they come round again, Brazilian guys, with more sheets of paper, and they're grabbing the ones they've given out earlier. And where's your team sheet from earlier? And tell us and the team is being changed. And I saw them coming around, so I snuck mine into my match programme, and I still have it at home. I have a team list, and Ronaldo's not in the Brazil team for the 1998 World Cup final, but 20 minutes later, he was.
I tell you what, between the Esso coins, the wall chart from '74, and the Ronaldo team sheet, that's quite a list. Finally, lads, we're really pushing time. Hopes for this year. What are you hoping to see? No Ireland, as we know. We want to see Messi, as you said, the crowning glory of his career, or
Ronaldo, Cristiano. I backed Germany to win it, so I'd love to see them. I think they have. It hasn't been done, believe it or not, since '62. No one has retained the World Cup. The whole World Cup has only ever been retained twice, and the last time it was retained was 1962. It'll be a hell of an achievement. I think they'll go close. They're always good. I think they actually have a better squad than 4 years ago. They have this guy who must be the unluckiest player in the world, Marco Reus, the guy from Borussia Dortmund. Brilliant midfield player. He's missed the last 2 tournaments with injury. He's 29 years of age and he only has something like 31 caps, even though he's a magnificent footballer. But he's there this year. Okay, they've lost to like a Lam and Schweinsteiger, but I think the team that beats Germany will win it.
Paul?
I hope Argentina win it because of Messi, because I'd love to see him crown his career. I don't think it will detract from his career if he doesn't win it. I think he needs Aguero to turn up and play a magnificent tournament to take some of the pressure off him. Defensively, they're a bit iffy. That's where I even though
the goalkeeper, I couldn't. This stat the other day, Sergio Romero, the Manchester United goalkeeper,
he's going to be number 1. Yeah.
No, he's injured. He has played every competitive game for Argentina since 2011, and now he's gone.
Yeah.
He's injured.
But defensively, I think there's a lot of weak teams. Attacking wise, you just look at the Spanish, the Germans, even the French. It's incredible. So I think we're going to have a good World Cup.
What happened the last time was there was a great group stage, and then the knockout stages got very tight, and there was a couple of good games. Brazil, Colombia was a physical game, wasn't it? And there was
Belgium and the USA.
One thing to do, talking about Philip and me and understanding the draw. FIFA, I won't say rigged, they have changed the way they did the seedings this year to do the draw. We don't have this year the famous El Grupo del Norte. They deliberately changed the draw to avoid having it. But what I think we're going to have is we're not going to have your Turkeys and your South Koreas in the knockout phase. I think the last 8 teams, you could nearly pick 7 of them now, and there might be one springer.
It's more of a general stuff. I wouldn't disagree with the lads specifically. I think Russia are a poor hosts, and they could be eliminated early. I think there will be one spring in the quarter-final, and I think the 2 finalists will have been in a final before.
Oh, shit.
Fair enough.
As who they would be, I don't know. But I'd be astonished if the 2 finalists haven't been in a final before.
Maybe Portugal might do you, would they?
Well, but the one team, if I was going to do one team, it would be Belgium. And I've kind of said them a little bit over the last sort of few months. I like to look at their players in the Premier League. Company seems to be injured again. I think that they should both get out of that group themselves in England. And after that, they might cause a bit of damage, because they destroyed us in Bordeaux 2 years ago and then didn't kick on. But they still have the nucleus of that team. And I think Eden Hazard, to me, was rival Salah and rival De Bruyne. They have De Bruyne, De Bruyne and Salah.
We're way out of time. The point, lads, made a great point earlier about World Cups that Ireland aren't involved in are great experiences. I went in 2006 as a fan with a few mates, and we got tickets for I think 6 or 7 games, and it's one of the best experiences ever. But the fact you're kind of going around meeting different fans from different groups, and we went to see Argentina, Serbia. Messi came on as a late substitute as an 18-year-old, I think.
Was that the goal?
But that was the goal. Yeah, the Cambiasso finished at the
Esteban Cambiasso, 24 passes.
I was at that match, and it was just incredible.
Yeah, so
Serbia weren't a bad old team.
Yeah. So listen, I hope we've got the point. Just because Ireland aren't in there,
that'll be good.
It's going to be brilliant anyway.
The kick-off times actually work from an Irish point of view.
Yeah, they're brilliant. Yeah,
it's really good.
And the Germans will win. As Gary Lineker always says, 22 men chase a ball around the pitch, and at the end the Germans win.
John Brennan, Paul Lennon and Philip Quinn, it's been brilliant listening to your memories. Veterans, as I said, get them another medal on those chests. Right, we're going to take a break now. You can text us 53106. We'll get a few more memories from you guys out there as well. At Off The Ball, you can tweet us as well.
Off the Ball on News Talk. Tech Talk with Jess Kelly.
This week on Tech Talk, personal trainer Carl Henry joins me to talk about the best tech for your health and the benefits of banishing your phone from the bedroom. We'll put the new Lenovo virtual reality headset through its paces and, of course, answer your tech questions.
Tech Talk with Jess Kelly.
Download the podcast now or tune in Sunday at 6.
On News Talk.
At Appliances Delivered, we'd like to say thanks for making us Ireland's highest